The reservation at Le Bernardin was for 7:30 p.m., and I arrived 15 minutes early, just as I'd been taught growing up in the Thompson household. The Michelin three-star restaurant hummed with a quiet efficiency that only came from years of perfected service, crystal glasses catching the warm light from handcrafted fixtures as servers glided between tables draped in pristine white linens. Dad's 65th birthday celebration was already underway when I reached our private dining room on the restaurant's exclusive second floor. The Thompson family had gathered in all their corporate glory: my parents, my older brother Marcus with his wife Victoria, my sister Catherine with her husband James, and various cousins and business associates who'd made the trip from Connecticut to Manhattan for tonight's milestone celebration. "Natalie, there you are," Mom said, barely glancing up from her animated conversation with Aunt Patricia about some charity board politics. "We already ordered the wine course." "Happy birthday, Dad," I said quietly, taking the empty seat at the far end of the table. "Thank you, sweetheart," Dad replied warmly, though his attention quickly returned to Marcus, who was regaling the table with stories about his latest corporate acquisition through Thompson Industries. I'd taken the subway here from my small apartment in Brooklyn, a journey that had taken 45 minutes and cost $2.75. Meanwhile, my family had arrived in hired cars and private drivers, their combined transportation costs for tonight probably exceeding my monthly grocery budget. To them, I was Natalie Thompson, the family underachiever who'd walked away from a promising career in corporate law to pursue what they called artsy restaurant fantasies. What they didn't know was that their struggling daughter had spent the last 3 years quietly building Meridian Restaurant Group into one of the city's most successful fine dining empires. "So, Natalie," Victoria said, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light as she gestured with her wine glass, "still working in that little cafe in Brooklyn?" "Something like that," I replied, taking a sip of water. "You know," Marcus chimed in, loosening his Hermes tie, "my firm is always looking for paralegals. The work isn't glamorous, but it pays well. Better than waiting tables." I nodded politely. "I appreciate the thought." Dad, founder and CEO of Thompson Industries, looked at me with a mixture of love and disappointment I'd grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. "Natalie, you're 31 years old. When are you going to stop playing restaurant and accept that this culinary dream isn't working out?" "It's working out fine, Dad." "Fine." Catherine laughed, adjusting her Cartier watch. "Sweetheart, you're barely scraping by. Look around. This is what success looks like." She gestured at the opulent dining room, the impeccable service, the carefully curated art collection adorning the walls. Le Bernardin represented the pinnacle of fine dining excellence, a place where reservation waiting lists stretched months into the future and a single dinner could cost more than most people's weekly salary. "When I was your age," James added, "I was already a junior partner at my law firm. You can't stay in entry-level positions forever." The word stung, but I kept my expression neutral. They had no idea that the entry-level position they mocked had evolved into owning Le Bernardin itself, along with 4 other restaurants that collectively generated over $47 million annually. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they'd spent the last 3 years dismissing my career as playing restaurant, I'd been systematically acquiring some of the city's most prestigious dining establishments. What started as working double shifts to learn every aspect of restaurant operations had evolved into building a culinary empire that employed over 600 people. "You know what your problem is, Natalie?" Marcus said, his voice taking on the condescending tone he'd perfected during his Harvard MBA program. "You lack ambition. You're content with mediocrity." "I'm quite content with what I've built," I said quietly. "Built?" Victoria laughed. "What have you built?" "You work for other people in other people's restaurants." As if on cue, our server approached, Henri, the restaurant's head sommelier, who'd worked at Le Bernardin for 8 years and had become one of my most trusted team members. "Good evening, Miss Thompson," Henri said with the subtle nod we'd practiced. To my family, it would appear as standard professional courtesy. "I trust everything is meeting your expectations this evening?" "Everything is perfect, Henri. Please give my compliments to Chef Bernard on tonight's menu." "Of course, madam." After Henri left, Marcus shook his head. "See? That's your problem right there. You're trying to impress servers instead of focusing on real career advancement. Actually, I was being polite to someone who's excellent at their job. Politeness won't pay your bills, Natalie, Dad said. You need to think practically about your future. The conversation continued through the appetizer course, seared foie gras with black truffle that cost $85 per serving. My family discussed their latest stock portfolios, real estate investments, and business deals while I listened quietly, thinking about the quarterly reports I'd reviewed earlier that day. Meridian Restaurant Group's Q3 numbers had been exceptional. Le Bernardin alone had generated $12.3 million in revenue, while our other properties, Oriole, Daniel, 11 Madison Park, and The Modern, had each exceeded projections. The combined portfolio was valued at approximately $180 million, making me one of the youngest restaurant moguls in Manhattan. The thing about fine dining, Marcus was explaining to his cousin Robert, is that it's an exclusive world. You need serious capital, industry connections, and business acumen to succeed at this level. He gestured around the dining room with the confidence of someone who'd never worked a single day in the service industry. Places like this don't just happen, he continued. They require millions in investment, relationships with the right suppliers, access to top culinary talent. It's not something you can just stumble into. I smiled at the irony. Marcus was lecturing the table about restaurant ownership while sitting in a restaurant I'd purchased for $23 million 2 years ago. Natalie could never afford to eat at a place like this on her own, Victoria added with false sympathy. We're just glad she can experience fine dining through family events. The comment hit particularly hard because it contained a grain of truth. 3 years ago, before I'd built my empire, I couldn't have afforded Le Bernardin's prices. But that was before I'd learned that success in the restaurant industry wasn't about having money to eat at expensive places, but about understanding every detail of what made those places exceptional. You know what I find fascinating about Le Bernardin? I said, setting down my fork. What's that? Dad asked. The business model. The way they've maintained 3 Michelin stars for over 15 years while still generating substantial profits. It's a masterclass in operational excellence. Marcus rolled his eyes. See? This is what I mean about lacking focus. You think about restaurants like businesses instead of appreciating them as dining experiences. Actually, I think the business side is quite interesting. The profit margins, the staffing efficiency, the supply chain management. Natalie, Catherine interrupted, normal people don't analyze restaurants. They just enjoy the food. The food is exceptional, I agreed. Chef Bernard's technique with the black base is particularly impressive. The way he sources from specific suppliers in Brittany, the temperature control during preparation, the timing of each course. How do you know all that? James asked. I pay attention to details. Well, paying attention won't help you afford places like this, Marcus said with a smirk. You'll never afford a place like this on a server salary. The words hung in the air, and I felt the familiar mixture of hurt and determination that had driven me for the past 3 years. I reached into my purse and pulled out a leather portfolio I'd brought specifically for this moment. Actually, I said calmly, I've owned this restaurant for 2 years. I opened the portfolio and placed the property deed on the table in front of Marcus. His smirk faded as he read the document header. Deed of ownership, Le Bernardin Restaurant, owner, Meridian Restaurant Group, LLC, Natalie Thompson, sole proprietor. His face went completely white. What is this? Dad asked, leaning forward to examine the document. The property deed for Le Bernardin. I purchased it in November 2021 for $23 million. Mom's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips. Natalie, what are you talking about? I own this restaurant, Mom. This one and 4 others in Manhattan. I spread out additional documents from the portfolio. Ownership papers for Oriole, Daniel, 11 Madison Park, and The Modern. This is impossible, Marcus whispered, his hands shaking as he examined the deeds. 3 years ago, when you all thought I was playing restaurant, I was actually working 18-hour days learning every aspect of fine dining operations. I started as a server, worked my way up to management, learned from the best chefs and restaurateurs in the city. But how did you afford? Victoria's voice trailed off. I didn't start by affording anything. I started by earning. Every tip, every paycheck, every small promotion went into savings. Then I secured investors who believed in my vision. Dad took the Le Bernardin deed with trembling hands. Natalie, this says the property is worth $37 million currently. The restaurant business has been very good to me. How is this possible? Catherine asked. Hard work, Catherine. And understanding that success in restaurants isn't about being able to afford eating at them. It's about creating experiences that people value. I pulled out my phone and opened the Meridian Restaurant Group app. We employ 643 people across our 5 properties. Last quarter, we generated $47 million in revenue. Marcus stared at the financial summary on my phone screen. $47 million? That's just one quarter. Annual revenue is projected at $190 million this year. But you said you were working in a cafe, Victoria protested. I said something like that. I didn't specify which cafe, or that I owned it. James examined the Daniel restaurant deed. This property alone must be worth $28 million. I acquired it 18 months ago when the previous owners couldn't handle the debt service. And 11 Madison Park? Dad asked, his voice barely audible. $42 million. That was my most expensive acquisition, but also the most profitable. Their tasting menu books solid for 6 months in advance. The silence stretched across the table as my family absorbed what they were seeing. Henri approached discreetly and placed a small card beside my plate. Your 8:30 reservation has arrived, Miss Thompson. Should we seat them at the chef's table as requested? Yes, thank you, Henri. And please send a bottle of the 2015 Chablis to table 12 with our compliments. After Henri left, Marcus looked up from the documents with a mixture of shock and embarrassment. You really own all of this? I really do. Why didn't you tell us? Mom asked, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Because every conversation became a lecture about my poor life choices. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe while I focused on building something meaningful. But the apartment in Brooklyn, the subway rides. The apartment is in Dumbo and costs $8,000 a month. I take the subway because it's faster than driving in Manhattan traffic. My Tesla is parked in the private garage at my building. Dad looked around the restaurant with new eyes. All of this, you built all of this. This and more. I'm also developing 2 new concepts, a seafood-focused bistro in the West Village and a rooftop cocktail bar in Soho. The investment must have been enormous, James said. Initial acquisition costs were about $130 million. I secured financing through a combination of private investors and bank loans, backed by detailed business plans and proven operational experience. Private investors? Catherine asked. People who understood the value of Manhattan fine dining real estate and my track record of operational improvements. Marcus was still staring at the deeds. I can't believe this. Which part? That I succeeded, or that you completely misjudged what I was doing? Both. Henri returned with a wine list. Miss Thompson, would you like to select tonight's wine pairings for the remaining courses? Please bring the 2018 Chassagne Montrachet for the fish course and the 2016 Gevry Chambertin for the meat course. Excellent choices, madam. After Henri left, Dad reached across the table and took my hand. Natalie, I'm so sorry. We completely underestimated you. You underestimated the restaurant industry, Dad. You assumed it was all playing instead of recognizing it as a serious business. But why restaurants? Mom asked. You could have done anything. Because I love creating experiences that bring people joy. Because I love the complexity of managing multiple moving parts to create something perfect. Because I believe food brings people together. I gestured around the dining room, where couples celebrated anniversaries, families marked milestones, and business deals were negotiated over carefully crafted meals. Every night, we create memories for our guests. Marriage proposals, birthday celebrations, business successes. We're part of the most important moments in people's lives. And it's profitable? Marcus asked, his business training overriding his shock. Extremely. Fine dining in Manhattan, when done correctly, has exceptional profit margins. The key is operational efficiency, supplier relationships, and maintaining consistent quality. Victoria was reading the 11 Madison Park documents. It says here you increased revenue by 30% in the first year. We streamlined operations, updated the wine program, and enhanced the tasting menu. Small improvements that made significant financial differences. What about staff? How do you manage 600 employees? Catherine asked. By treating them well. Fair wages, comprehensive benefits, opportunities for advancement. Happy employees create better guest experiences, which drives revenue. Dad was still examining the Loeb Bernardine deed. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. And so sorry we didn't see what you were building.
Thank you, Dad.
Can you forgive us for doubting you? I looked around the table at my family, the same people who dismissed my dreams 3 years ago, but who now looked at me with newfound respect and admiration. There's nothing to forgive. You couldn't see my vision because I hadn't built it yet. But now that it exists, I hope you'll support it. How can we support you? Mom asked. By understanding that success comes in many forms. By recognizing that building something meaningful takes time and dedication. Marcus finally looked up from the documents. Natalie, I owe you an apology. I was completely wrong about your choices. Thank you, Marcus. Do you need any help? Legal assistance? Business consultation? I smiled. Actually, I've been considering acquiring a restaurant in Hartford. If you know any good corporate lawyers. He laughed, and for the first time in 3 years, it felt genuine rather than condescending. As dessert arrived, a chocolate souffle that Chef Bernard had prepared personally, Dad raised his glass. To Natalie, who built something beautiful while we weren't paying attention. We're sorry we missed the journey, but we're grateful to be part of celebrating the destination. The toast was accompanied by applause from surrounding tables, and I realized that several regular guests had recognized the significance of the moment. Later, as we prepared to leave, Henri approached with the evening's final surprise. Miss Thompson, Chef Bernard would like to present tonight's bill. He handed me a leather portfolio containing the check for our 9-person dinner. The total was $2,847. I looked at the bill, then at my family, then back at Henri. Please charge this to the house, Henri. Family dinners are always complimentary. As we walked out of Le Bernardine into the Manhattan night, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd proven my family wrong, but because I'd proven to myself that following your passion could lead to extraordinary success. Sometimes the best revenge isn't showing people they were wrong about your failure. Sometimes it's showing them they were wrong about what success looks like. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they'll love you enough to celebrate your success rather than questioning how you achieved it.